Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we are talking about Trench Crusade. This is a tabletop skirmish game that blew up a few months ago, back late last year when its Kickstarter raised over $3 million, well past their goal of $66,666. A lot of people, especially from the Warhammer 40,000 universe, game, effectively, definitely brought this game into the limelight because the similarities between how grim dark it is and especially with how grim dark Warhammer 40k is, a lot of the people who are really fans of the lore of 40k, if you look up Trench Crusade on YouTube, you can definitely tell there's a ton of lore videos on this game. And it sort of blew up through that space. In addition to that, another big reason why it blew up is because one of the creators behind it, Mike Francina, who sort of created the world and especially the art for this game, he's a very well-known artist that a lot of people have been following for quite a long time, especially in the video gaming space. He's done work on stuff like Diablo. He's done concept art and art for, I believe, even things like Magic the Gathering. So he's a very, very well-known artist that has quite a big following. And when he started releasing art for this game, a lot of people definitely perked their ears and eyes up about sort of what this game might be all about and things like that. He made art for this game even before it was actually a game. Him and I believe a guy named James Sheriff, it's either James Sheriff or Jason Sheriff, I apologize if getting that incorrect, who was a sort of a 3D sculptor that did a sort of a model run for this game, or at least for this world. Him and Mike Francina did sort of just a small release of models for the game in Kickstarter back in 2022, I believe it was, and that was pretty successful. And then after that, Mike Francina actually wanted to turn his sort of vision and his dream into an actual game. So that's when he brought on, and I'm also going to butcher this pronunciation, Tuomas Pirinen, and he is very, very well known because he was the lead designer for Mordheim and created that rule set. And so he's definitely got his chops well dug into the sort of narrative skirmish gaming space. And this is a narrative skirmish tabletop game that he's designing the rule set for now. And so ever since that really, really extremely successful Kickstarter, the game has still been growing in a multitude of different ways. Not only are third parties making their own models for the game, but just the rule set in general has sort of expanded quite a bit beyond their initial scope, and it's going to continue expanding upon that initial scope that they had. You can play the game right now for free. The playtest rules are online. They even have like a lore primer if you're interested in the world of Trench Crusade. But if you, as a surface level, if you are unfamiliar with what this tabletop skirmish game is all about, it is a narrative-driven campaign game. It is meant to be played as a campaign, meaning unlike games like Warhammer Kill Team or Marvel Crisis Protocol, where it's mostly just about the singular battles and they're not really connected or things like that. You play one-off games and that's, they're done and done. Narrative campaign games are built more upon the idea of playing a multitude of games over the course of a longer period of time and, leveling up your warband, rebuying potential losses that you have from battle to battle, and getting extra bonuses and potential exploration and loot in between those battles and tying to that stuff together a little bit more narratively. Narrative games are inherently a little bit less competitive as well due to the nature that they have a little bit more RNG, I guess you can say, just to sort of facilitate more emergent storytelling. So for example, when an elite dies in Trench Crusade or gets out of action during a battle, after the battle you have to roll on an injury chart and they can potentially get battle scars and maybe like lose an eye or something like that, and that can affect them permanently moving forward. So there's a little bit more emergent and fun storytelling when it comes to narrative style games. Like this. But as a surface level, this game is set during an alternate universe, alternate world of Earth during World War I, hence the Trench Crusade name, being done in Trench style combat during World War I. And essentially, in that alternate timeline of Earth, back during the Crusades, the Templars effectively found a very unholy relic and found essentially a way to, they sort of fell to the dark side, I guess, and essentially opened the gates of hell purposefully, bringing the forces of hell onto Earth. And ever since the Crusades, it's sort of been a constant struggle between, men and demon, good and evil, heaven and hell, and that's essentially the setting that you're playing playing in during World War I. It's a really, really cool world. You can definitely tell by the art itself that it's very captivating, and that's sort of one of the reasons why the game sort of blew up and the Kickstarter blew up, is because even just having the art go viral on things like Twitter, everyone's first thing people ask are like, what is this game? What is this world? And that obviously introduces them to sort of the rule set in the game and sort of all that good stuff. Now, the nice thing about this game is model agnostic. What that means is, unlike Warhammer 40K, for example, where you have official box sets that you have to purchase and use those official models, especially if you're going to be doing like official events and things like that. Mike Franchina and Tuomas Pirinen and the team behind Trench Crusade are effectively encouraging kit bashing, encouraging you using your own models. So while I have some of the official models in front of me here, these are the 3D printed ones. The physical models won't be available until the Kickstarter is fulfilled and done, I believe, in June, along with the physical rulebook and the official sort of 1.0 for the rule set. But you can purchase the STL files online right now if you have a 3D printer or have access to the 3D printer. But they're, as long as you have the right base sizes, you can use whatever models you actually want to. And there's been a lot of cool kit bashing. There's been other third-party companies that have made their own Trench Crusade models for you to use. So it's really, really cool in that sense that you can, pretty much buy into this game for a very low cost if you have a 3D printer or have access to one. But also what I love about skirmish games in general is because rule sets are typically found online, there's tons of free resources online. You only need to map out a specific play space. In Trench Crusade's case, you're working either with a 3x3 foot or a 4x foot play space. They recommend 4x foot though. You just need some terrain. You can use whatever you want to have lying around the house. It's a D6 rule set, so you just need a handful of D6 dice, and you need a measuring tool. Typically people just use measuring tape because you do measure quite far distances in this game. Guns can have up to like 48-inch range guns, so measuring tape, everyone has access to a measuring tape, and that's really all you need. So since the playtest rules are free online, you can just start playing right away. And my friends and I have already started playing a campaign in this game and have really, really been enjoying it. And that's why I wanted to make this video today, is to sort of talk a little bit about the game, why I really, really like it, and sort of at a surface level what it's all about, so you can potentially fall in love with it as well, because that's essentially all this channel is. It's just for me to share my love of tabletop and board games with you guys, and hopefully some of you may fall in love with the same things that I fall in love with. So I just love to share my favorite things. Pretty straightforward. There's nothing too complicated about that. In terms of how the game actually plays, it is a skirmish game, so typically played 1 versus 1 against your opponent. I believe they might be planning on potentially adding in some solo or PvE rules, but at the moment there's currently nothing on the line for that. And so you have your own what is called a warband or faction, and then your opponent has a warband. You bring those to the table and you run scenarios or missions, typically each one having their own unique way of scoring points, and whoever has the most victory points at the end of that is the winner. But again, like I mentioned, this is meant to be played as a campaign style game, so even after that you'll roll on some random tables, maybe you'll lose some guys, maybe your guys will gain some experience points and level up and gain new skills. Certain models may be promoted to elite status. You'll purchase new models for your warband, and your warband will effectively grow over the course of that campaign until the campaign's done and someone is declared a winner of that campaign. The game is very, very simple to pick up. It's one of the main reasons why this game has sort of been highly regarded, is because of how simple and what I would call elegant the rule set is. Obviously, the rules are still in playtest version. Editing team still needs a lot to do. There's still a lot of rule clarifications that need to be had. However, at its base core, it's 110% playable. It's a lot of fun, and Tuomas essentially designed this game so you only really need to memorize 2 different tables to sort of actually play the game. Obviously, there's a lot of different nuances and use case scenarios that go outside of those 2 tables, but at its core, you're playing with D6 dice. Each model has a variety of actions they can do. You can do every single action once. Obviously, there's exceptions to that rule, but you can do every action once. There are certain things called risky actions, though. So if you fail those actions, your model's activation is done. Because this is a skirmish game on a smaller scale, unlike something like Warhammer 40,000, you alternate model activations. So I would activate one model, my opponent would activate one, and we'd go back and forth until everyone's activated, and then a new turn or round starts. To do an action in this game, though, it's very, very simple. You start with 2 base d6, so 2d6, you roll them, and then if you get a 7 or higher, your action succeeds. If you get a 6 or lower, your action fails. Again, if it's a risky action, then your activation is done. Then it's your opponent's turn. However, if your action succeeds, even if it is a risky action, you can just keep doing other actions. So you could dash, which is a risky action, but if you succeeded that, you could then charge into melee combat, make a melee action, maybe kill that model, and then if your model has a ranged weapon, they could even shoot afterwards out when they've killed that melee combatant. So you can chain a lot of cool actions together. It's very, very simple to pick up. And that's the base core. Now, when it comes to modifying those rolls, that's the nice thing as well, is this game has very little math involved. So what happens when you want to add plus or negative modifiers is just you add d6 dice. So let's say, for example, I wanted to do a dash, which is a risky action. I would roll my 2d6. If I got 6 or less, I would fail. 7 or higher is a success. If I had a +1 to that dash, though, I would add 1d6 to my base roll. So now I have 3d6, but I still only take the 2 highest because I'm at a positive modifier. I roll the 3 dice, take the 2 highest, and then if it's 7 or higher, succeeds. 6 or less, it fails. And it just keeps on doing that. So if I had +2 to my action, I would add 2 dice, take the 2 highest. Now, if I had base 2 and I had negative to that modifier, if I had, let's say, -2 to dash, I would still add in 2 dice, but I would roll them and take the 2 lowest results and see if they add up to 7 or higher. And that is the core of the game, and that's all you really need to know. Now, the next table you need to know is the injury chart, and that's only used for attacking and getting hit. What that is just you're rolling 2d6 again base. There's a chart where on a 1 nothing happens. You can get a 1 just because people have armor, and that reduces the value or the result. If you get a 1, nothing happens. On a 2 to 6, you get what is called a blood marker, which I'll get into in a second. It's one of the unique mechanics to this game. A 7 or an 8 means the model gets downed, so they fall down, and they get a blood marker as well. And then a 9 or higher is out of action, so the model is removed from the board. And it's the same concept works for modifying that as well. If I had a weapon that does +1 dice to injure, I would have my 2 dice base. I would add 1 dice, I would roll them and add the 2 highest together because we're at a positive modifier. And then we would see if it results in a 9 or higher to potentially kill that model or whatever it is on the chart. That is what the result is. And so it's very, very simple. Now, blood markers are sort of the unique mechanic to this game, and it's what really makes for some very interesting decision-making in this game. Whenever a model gets injured, it's sort of a way to represent how injured that model is. You can have up to 6 blood markers on a model, but you can use those offensively and defensively. Let's say, for example, my war wolf here has got hit by a ranged weapon and has and received a blood marker. So we have 1 blood marker on this model. Now, whenever I go to use that model and I try to do an action with that model, my opponent, before I roll the dice, can say, I spend X amount of blood markers, meaning it uses up however many blood markers he wants to, and it adds that many negative dice to my action. So let's say I had +1 initially to my action, and I had one blood marker. My opponent could spend that blood marker, so I take away 1d6, and then I'm back to just a base 2d6 roll. So you can use them almost defensively like that to slow your opponent down, but if it's on your opponent's models, then you can use them a little bit more offensively. So if I'm attacking this werewolf and it has 1 blood marker on it, when I go to injure that model, I could actually spend that blood marker to add d6 dice to that injury roll to have a better chance of getting higher up on the injury chart and increasing my chances of out of actioning them. So that's a really, really cool way to use blood markers. And there's even models in the game that can cast spells using the blood markers as sort of the resource to cast those spells, called goetic spells. So yeah, that is the core of the game. Just with what I described to you, you can pick up and play this game, honestly. Obviously, there's a lot more to it, especially when it comes to unit-specific abilities, but at its core, things are just going to be adding or reducing the amount of d6 dice you roll, and you're just looking really for 7s or higher, or if you're injuring, you're just looking at whatever result you get on the injury chart, whatever the result is on the highest 2d6 dice, the highest 2 dice on that d6 pool, or 3d6 potentially if you're what is called bloodbathing, which you can use blood markers to sort of add an extra d6 to add to the result, again, increasing your chances of out-of-actioning someone. And that is the core of the game. It's very, very fast-paced, very, very quick, and it's just really, really fun. Like, it's one of those games that it is more of a beer and pretzels game, but I still love the amount of tactical decision making you have. Not only that, it has what I really, really love in skirmish games, which is list building. So you're really able to make your list your own and really have some fun playing around with different equipment that you want to put on your guys and figure that out, because the currency in this game is called ducats, and so essentially every time you go to battle, there's a certain threshold of ducats worth of models and equipment that you can bring into the fight. So there's sort of a limit. So you're making, similar to how Warhammer 40,000 has point system for their units. That's sort of the point system for this game is ducats. But yeah, it's super cool. Like, again, I have a lot of gray here, but I'm slowly but surely painting the models. Here's a closer look at my werewolf. The models and the lore in this game is super, super cool. This guy, right, has a chainsaw maw. So essentially the werewolf was designed to fly over no man's land and use its chainsaw mouth to actually burrow and cut through the barbed wire to sort of let the other forces through. This is sort of my leader, my heretic priest. And he's got a special ability that he can actually puppet master people. He can actually puppet master people by doing a risky action and moving them a certain amount of movement, including moving them in and out of melee combat. So there's a lot of cool combos you can do with him. You have, of course, this is one of the models that really sort of blew up on social media with its art, the Artillery Witch, which you can sort of tell from what the name is. It's essentially a unit that summons big ass bombs from the depths of hell to throw at their opponents. I'm playing the Heretic Legion, essentially, one of the forces of hell. Obviously, normally play the good guys in games, but the models were so cool in this faction that I just had to purchase them. Well, not purchase them. Luckily, someone in my play group had access to the 3D STL files, and I just had to pay him for printing off the models. And that's one of the nice things about having a 3D printed game as well, is it's quite accessible in terms of cost. Like for all these models, it was only about $40, and that's only because that's what my friend charged me for printing off the models. So yeah, it's super, super easy to get into, and the rule set's simple to pick up. I think a lot of games that you look at, games like Infinity, for example, and Warhammer Kill Team, those are a lot more competitive-oriented games, and they're a lot crunchier rule sets, meaning it's going to take you a lot longer to actually get in them, and those games can be quite overwhelming to get into. Even if you have just traditional board game experience, if you play games like Cthulhu Death May Die, or if you play more complex stuff like Kingdom Death Monster, like that's the level of complexity, maybe even less, to be honest, in Trench Crusade than those types of games. Obviously the main barrier, I guess, to this game and learning the game is just knowing like unit specific abilities and knowing what your opponent's models do, but even then, there's not like tons of different models that have unique things, and a lot of the time there's like similarities and crossover in the abilities, so it doesn't take that long to start memorizing that stuff after you've played it a few times. But I'm currently about to do my second game in the campaign today actually with my friend, and the play group that I'm playing with, we're doing sort of a game every 2 weeks, but you're able to play as many games as you want to, and so you just take the best result that you want to bring over to the next week or the next couple of weeks. So it's a very, very fun campaign system. There's also a lot of room for just house ruling, and obviously the rule set is still in playtest form. So there's a lot of ways you can just sort of make the game your own that way, and just ensure that you can have like the most fun possible with you and your friends. And so yeah, it's just a really, really fantastic game. Really, really elegant rule set. I'm very excited to see what the final product is going to be. I'm definitely going to be picking up the physical rule book once that is completed and the Kickstarter is fulfilled. I've already started learning how to digitally kit bash some of these models because I want to actually have the proper weapons on them later represented in the campaign. So it's honestly sparked sort of my love of the hobby aspect as well. I am still a slow ass painter, but I am quite interested in getting these all painted up and ready to go. And especially just how my warband will evolve, because again, it's so early in our campaign that I have no clue what my dice are going to do throughout the campaign. It was really, really funny. Like in my first campaign battle, after we rolled on the exploration chart, it turns out my faction actually took one of my opponent's models captive, and I was actually able to put a ducat price on his head that he had to pay me to get his model back. So this really, really fun things like that can happen. You can discover like random extra loot. There are also cool things during each scenario called glorious deeds that you can accomplish, and a glory is like an additional currency that you can use to buy sort of like extra special weapons and gear and stuff like that. There's 6 factions currently in the game, and each one has multiple sub-factions at the moment. I'm playing the Heretic Legion, like I mentioned. I'm playing a specific sub-faction called Knights of Avarice, which are all about sort of gold and loot and stuff like that, so they actually can't use like fire weapons or shrapnel weapons because they actually don't want to destroy the opponent's gear because they want to keep it as their own loot. So all of like the artillery, which for example gets automatically turned into a gas bomb instead of an explosive bomb, which is very, very cool. So that's the Heretic Legion. We have the other forces of evil. We have the 7 Court of the 7-Headed Serpent. They're very demonic, for example. They actually have some of the most powerful spellcasters in the game as well. There's also the Black Grail, which are, if you are familiar with like, Nurgle, for example, from Warhammer 40k. That's essentially the Nurgle in this game. Nurgle faction is the Black Grail. Very gross, very demonic, just abominations in general. Then you have on the forces of good, you have New Antioch, which are one of the main man-fighting forces, essentially the Imperial Guard and Space Marines of Trench Crusade. Then you also have Iron Sultanate, which are very, very cool. Super, super cool faction. They were actually my second pick in terms of how cool the models look for the Iron Sultanate. They're an Islamic faction as well. So very, very cool to sort of see that representation there. And then we have, what was the third one? Trench Pilgrims. Trench Pilgrims are another man, well, sort of a man. They do have some abomination stuff in their faction, but essentially they're extremely zealous to the point of like, I could go into like the lore a little bit deeper and stuff like that, but essentially they feed what is called like the Metachrist to some of their models that turn them into like crazy, crazy abominations, but they're the good guys, of course. So yeah, I think that's all the factions, and there's of course more coming along the way. There's 2MS is definitely developing more sub-factions for each faction as well. So there's a lot of room for this game to grow, and I definitely want to just make this video rambling and talking about sort of why I love this game, why you should give it a shot as well. And if you're already playing this game, let me know in the comments below. Let me know what faction you're playing. Let me know how your campaign is going as well. I might end up doing a how to play once the actual final rule book is done, because I don't want to do one just yet because the rules may change here and there, but I think I'll wait till the physical rule book is out. But that's all I wanted to do. It's just going to be a classic you should play, splurging about my love of Trench Crusade. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.